critical reflection attached to the object, and it gives students no sense of their branding, personal identity, space out there in the digital world, let alone higher order thinking that made that happen.
Exactly. And the day yesterday we had a very good presentation with AJ Barse, and that was like how to do. That was, but then my presentation is going to be the whys. Why would you do that, and what would you learn from your experience of creating an e-portfolio, and then how would you sell yourself? I mean, the student, when you go to the job market, when you would be really using that. And more so, it's going to be about what do you learn through the process of creating an e-portfolio. And I think it might be useful for instructional designers in this room to help faculty members realize that, so that they can see the e-portfolio creation process as not something which their school has asked them to do. So that they know that, yeah, I'm doing something productive and my students are learning and I'm covering material. I'm not just creating a showpiece for my school to use for accreditation or any other purpose. And my things are getting covered, my syllabus is getting covered, I'm still doing something important. So that's how you can sell this process to your faculty members. Okay, so the title, as you can see, is Leveraging e-portfolio creation to teach students higher order thinking skills, in short, HOTS. Okay, that's an interesting name. Okay, we're going to basically talk about how to prepare students for the job market. We're going to go into a definition of e-portfolios and what do we mean by that, and how e-portfolios have changed over the years. We're also going to touch about Bloom's higher order thinking skills and how it has changed over the years. And then how can the process of building e-portfolios teach students higher order thinking skills? And finally, we are going to focus on a model which was developed by Pick and More, and I do not know how to pronounce the first name. It sounds really horrible, so I'll just say Pick and More. I mean, yeah, Pick and More. In 2012, these researchers are from Australia, and they have used the model primarily for engineering education and creation of e-portfolios in engineering sciences. So, but I think it has wider application for every field. Okay, as I talked about earlier, students are going into the job market, professors are preparing them for that, but how are we preparing them? Because we all know that the key component of going into a job search is a resume, and that one resume really does not fit all job applications. The students need to understand that employers differ in their needs, all jobs have different needs, and we really need to kind of read into the nuances of a job application to understand how an applicant is suitable for that job and then apply. One has to respond very appropriately for each job and has to prepare an e-portfolio which is exclusively catered to the needs of that job, rather than have a single e-portfolio which one thinks is applicable everywhere, because that's not the case anymore. We have to highlight our relevant assets for that job and then present that. So the core thing is that how do we prepare our students? Because we all get grades and we all have degrees and we all have resumes, but how do we do that preparation? Is it through experiential learning? We throw our students into the world through internships and let them gather experience which they can go and talk about in their job interviews, or do we make them have great e-portfolios, and what do we do and how do we do that? So the definition of e-portfolios in 2005 was, it's a digitized collection, and it demonstrates your accomplishments, and it's usually meant for, like, you sell yourself. You go to an institution or your group and you sell yourself and your accomplishments. So this is an old definition, and we're going to see that most of that definition hasn't changed, but the way we package ourselves, the way the e-portfolio is packaged has of course changed. E-portfolios are often referred to as web folios or digital portfolios, and we heard a lot from AJ yesterday about how to really create very good e-portfolios through all the resources that he provided us with. Like I said before, the paper or the physical e-portfolio is, it's history. It's hardly available. You probably have some art students or some fashion design students have real physical portfolios, but most of it is either electronic or now it's more cloud or web based, so that you can have your e-portfolio all the time with you. And even if you're traveling on a plane or in wherever in a different country and you find your potential employer, you can display your abilities to that person. So why do we need e-portfolios? Firstly, of course, we need to showcase or we need to highlight our achievements, and we should have engaging content there. And in the process of building an e-portfolio, we can help students reflect and think critically, and also review the progress. So the e-portfolio creation starts, say, the first year of college, and the students build over the years, and they continuously reflect on what they have been doing, and they benchmark their progress and against some kind of professional criteria. For example, in engineering, you have the ABET accreditation body, that's their professional body, so they have certain things which they want their students to be able to do rather than just know. So the e-portfolio can be matched with those criteria and just make the students be prepared for the job market when they really have to demonstrate their abilities. So in order to do that, one has to formulate an action plan very early on and make sure that the demonstrated achievement matches that action plan and the student knows what he or she is really doing. So it has to, of course, be a repository of evidence, because you're doing things where you are selling yourself to your employers, potential employers. It is not enough to have just e-portfolio, because you have to cater your e-portfolio to a particular job, and then the question remains, like, how do we demonstrate that we do have higher order thinking skills, and those skills differentiate one potential applicant from another. And then if that applicant has that higher order thinking skills, then they're chosen or selected by the hiring body as against other students who don't have that ability. And then the process of building e-portfolios itself can be a teaching moment or a teaching process where, like I spoke before, where the student develops higher order thinking skills while creating the e-portfolio. Now, a little snapshot of Bloom's levels of learning, and this was what Bloom originally, these categories are what Bloom originally created, which is knowledge comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. However, down the line, the one additional category, which is create, which is the highest in the triangle on top, was added at a future date, and now we know that's the revised Bloom's category. And creation is indeed what we are doing through e-portfolio. That's what the students demonstrates the ability to create. So right now we have like a full completion of triangle, and that's what you can really achieve through e-portfolios. So when we talk about higher order thinking skills, we are really talking about the power of analysis, synthesis, evaluation, and finally creation, which is your product in the form of the e-portfolio. So the purpose of our discussion today is going to be how can the process of building an e-portfolio help students to develop higher order thinking skills. And like I mentioned before, I'm going to focus on the model by Pick and Moore, developed in 2012. Okay, so the way Pick and More talk about this model is that they see the student taking up different roles and throughout their career as a student. So once they enter college, they take up a role, and through the years in college, it's like a quest. Each of the year, it's kind of like a gaming model. So they take up different roles at different stages of their career as a student, and they continually develop their e-portfolio through various questions that they ask themselves and to their peers. So the way they document their progress is through a reflection site. Typically, it can be a wiki or any other, like now we have more technologies which we can use. It can be anything like a Google Doc or other sharing models. So, but it's basically going to be a process of reflection and asking a lot of important questions which help them develop that higher order thinking skill. So they have to be very mindful and purposeful of their role as a creator of ePortfolio. So they have to ask why am I taking up this role, and what kind of critical thinking is required in this particular role. And Pick and More assigned the students 4 roles. So each of the roles, the student has to ask a lot of questions to themselves. And based on the answers to the questions, they're going to kind of populate their wiki. So they need to think, what skills do I need to develop, and ask very meaningful questions. So that those questions are important, because asking meaningful questions is a fundamental requirement in most professions. Even if they're working, say as an engineer, they're problem solving all the time, and they're using the knowledge which they have acquired in their real life. So they have to ask a lot of questions. Questions help people have clarity of focus, and they kind of stimulate their thinking, and also they encourage engagement with whatever problem they have to deal with in their work life. So this is a graphic which Pick and More provide. So at the center of the graphic of the model they have is the student as a reflexive narrator. So and then they take on 4 roles. One is of the asset builder, then they take the role of an e-portfolio creator, then they become a competency tracker, and then they become a job clarifier. And I'm going to focus on each of these as we proceed. So the job clarifier role is where the student develops a clear understanding of what actually their employers need. So they can, what are your employers, what are their employers looking for? What kind of attributes, what kind of competencies, and what competencies are really important in their field. So they reflect on that, and they think about how can I develop that competency. Right now, I'm in this situation. I'm a first-year student. I have no idea about how to do this. So they realize that there is a gap between what they are and what they should be, and they reflect on it, and they then do things which take classes, take courses, or make connections which make that gap narrower and narrower. So, and then they also think about how can I demonstrate this competency which my job or my employer requires. Then in that process, they realize that it's not possible to develop a particular competency in one class, and that becomes a watertight competency. That doesn't happen. The more the student reflects, he or she realizes that competencies are developed beyond the class. So what they learn in one class or course can be applied in other courses or in their real life. So that reflection brings them to a higher level of learning, and they realize how everything is a web, and how the questions that they might face in a potential interview is not going to be just based on a class. It's going to spread out in everything. So they need to develop that kind of reflection and see connections between all their courses. So the job clarifier role is, the basic outcome of this role is that they become aware of what the example pick and more had is of engineering. So they say that they have to have an awareness of what the engineering profession is, what are the requirements. Then they look at an advertisement, a job advertisement, and they see that what do their employers need and what kind of competencies do they currently have which can meet that need. So what is the employer is asking for, what do I have as a student to fill that need, and what do I need to develop to reach to fulfill that need, and how can I demonstrate that I do have that professional capability. They reflect and they see that, okay, what evidence can I have in my portfolio which will meet that need and show that I am a better candidate than my other competitors. So that reflection is a process that brings them to a higher level of learning. So the asset that they really build and include in their e-portfolio is an evidence. It's an entity of evidence, and it kind of demonstrate what kind of accomplishments or what skills and competencies they have. And that helps them build a very targeted e-portfolio for each job. So they might have evidence of a lot of abilities in their general portfolio, but for each job, they need to have a specific section of the e-portfolio, the link of which they can provide to their employer to see. So the employer doesn't need to see everything that they have done in their 4 years of school. The employer just needs to know evidence of what they have, what specifically pertains to the job. And in that sense, an asset in that targeted e-portfolio is both an artifact as well as a product of reflection. So soon as the employer sees that the evidence is not just a general list of abilities, but it's just catered to the job, that candidate gets more leverage than others who haven't got such a streamlined portfolio to present. Okay, then the question arises, like, why should we like build such targeted e-portfolios, and what is the importance of this asset builder role? So now I'm going to ask you these questions is like, in your practice as an instructional designer or as a help person, have you ever come across situations where professors have come to you to ask questions about, like, I'm assigned to do this e-portfolio for my students, but then what do I do here? But any questions like that? Have you ever?
Faculty, yeah, they always.
Uh-huh.
Question, what do we do?
Yeah. What do we do? So how do you tackle, like, any suggestions that you give them?
Well, so far not.
Okay.
Not many.
Uh-huh.
Just because I haven't worked enough with
Uh-huh.
faculty.
So does your school have a set of objectives or learning outcomes that they have to match?
There are overall goals.
Okay.
And, yeah, I mean, again, I think the first thing I try to do is to get them to think about what activities they can do to help kind of scaffold the portfolio learning process. But,
Right.
But yeah, in terms of getting them out of the notion that it's just a repository.
Right. Okay. So one of the ways it might be helpful is to look at what the learning outcomes are for that program or for the university as a whole, and then see what kind of evidence can be provided to kind of substantiate or support those learning outcomes. So, okay. So building on that, so the students has to kind of be encouraged to explore multiple ways in which they can embody their learning, not only just have the same type of evidences. They should have like multiple and various evidences, so that any question in the interview they can provide, like they can field that question by like giving an example of their experience in that field, and they can show their product. So as what happens as a result is that the outcome is that students become very flexible in their learning approach. So they see that okay, I'm looking at my course in this way, but in this perspective, but it can be looked at in other ways too. So on the whole, it prepares the student to be more of an active learner and more more reflective on what they are doing, so they can really not just be a consumer of knowledge, but be just a producer, and in a way in which they can kind of analyze what they're learning. So they learn during the experience in their classes, and also after their experience, because they are reflecting. When they're making a product, they're not looking at, okay, this is an assignment only. They're looking at the so-called assignment and saying, how can I use it, and how can this be useful? How can I answer questions when people ask about this product that I'm making? So it's both during as well as an after reflection, and that we know will help them become higher order thinkers. So they have to look beyond the confines of a particular subject. Like I mentioned before, it's just not one course, it's just not one product. People have to look at the alignment or the web of abilities which they demonstrate, which they learn in the various courses. So each competency is pretty multifaceted, because the questions which we generally are asked at job interviews are not very simple and straightforward. They kind of assume that we know more than we know. So one has to reflect on learning and see backgrounds and build on that. That is a gradual process. It's not doesn't happen in a year. It might take 4 years. It might take graduate school, but it's just a gradual process of building, and it develops across courses. So the role of an asset builder is one of the roles is one has to know that there are multiple paths of achieving a learning outcome, and when you make various products to show those abilities, the student really realizes that aspect. So this is their graphic. This is Pick and Moore's graphic. So you have learning experience, and you create the artifact, but after you create the artifact, you reflect on it, and then that becomes an asset for your e-portfolio, because just a raw artifact is not something which is going to help you in the job market. Once you reflect on it, you know that what are the pros and cons, what are the deficits in it, and then you make it better, and then it becomes a part of your real e-portfolio, and that is an asset, just not a product. So the second role is that of a competency tracker, by which he means that, is that as you develop your e-portfolio down the years, you track the growth of your competency as an engineer, as a student, and you see how your skill has developed through the years. So in a first year student's product may be something which is very rudimentary, maybe not even near anywhere what a job advertisement requires them to do. That does not mean that that product is useless. You still have it in your portfolio, but that's still not an asset. That's just a product. So the more you reflect and you develop and you add onto it, you become that slowly becomes an asset which can be used in the job market. So the outcome of this whole process is become more aware of what you're doing, of your own competency as a student, as a learner, and then you realize that there are like a diversity of tracks in which you can demonstrate your ability, and you choose in what way you want to do. You want to demonstrate according to the needs of the job that you're interviewing for. So you always get an opportunity to revisit, and you need to revise, and you need to refresh your the products in your e-portfolio, and that kind of leads to lifelong learning, because you're not ending anywhere. And even if you get a job, you don't necessarily stop building your e-portfolio, because we all know that jobs can go. So you become a lifelong learner, and what you learn in college, you continue to do that throughout your profession, just to develop yourself. So like I mentioned earlier, the awareness of the outcomes that you get after taking a course is what you really learn from that course. and then you use that awareness across all courses, and then you transfer skills across the settings so that you're not limited to that course only. You just you're ready for any kind of question. The competency tracker, this is their model. So basically the student asks, what competencies do I have currently, what do I need, and how will I develop them, and what kind of evidence can I provide to match that, match what is required of me, and then how can I review my progress through the stages of development. So they kind of, they have a learning experience, then they create an asset, then they evaluate that, and then they plan more, and then this is kind of a continuous circular motion, and it goes on throughout the process, throughout the time that they're in school and after. So the third role that the student takes on is that of a reflective narrator. So here the learner is both a participant in his own learning as well as an observer. So that's how they kind of separate themselves from their learning, and they get above and they just see themselves, and then they change and revise and think. So that brings them to a higher order thinking skill, because they grow from their experience. They don't stop at the end of a particular course. Even if they get an A, they still think, oh, how could I improve that better? And they reflect in their wiki, they talk with their peers, and they talk with their professors, and they improve it. So they have to understand their audience, because they have to understand who are these people who are like evaluating me in the job market. So they continuously look at job advertisements, and they kind of selectively present themselves, and they gain insights from both the highlights as well as the lowlights, and that's important something, because it's not only the good or the successes that you learn from, you also majorly learn from your failures. So a product which they create, say at their first year of school, they don't have to necessarily be ashamed of that. They still learn what's the deficit there, and they improve it in better format in later iterations. So the reflexive narrator will always they will evaluate their assets against selection criteria, which is the job requirements, and they see whether it's relevant, and they will kind of try to demonstrate how am I suitable for this job, for this particular employer, how am I going to am I really suitable or not. So the model that they over here have is the self is at the center, that's the student. They each have a story, and they have a narrative about themselves and their life and their their learning, and that kind of, they have highlights, which is their successes, and they have lowlights, which is their failures, and out of that develops their self-awareness and their personal story, which is different for every student, and they're depending on what kind of insights they can draw from their experiences. So this is kind of the ultimate graphic that they have to encompass their whole model. So I would encourage, like, if any of you want to delve more into it, you can go and look at. They have an article, and you can have a look at it. It's okay, that name, okay, is PRPIC and more right here. You can have a look at it.
Do they include how to kind of shape and frame your deficits? Because obviously a student isn't going to put there, oh, I'm really bad at this. And then that's like, well, you don't want to put, these are the things I'm bad at. So do they talk about how to kind of frame it in, I learned this is an area that I'm working on and continuing improving on, where this is something. Do they do that at all? Or?
No. Rick and Moore don't do that. All they say is that you have a wiki in which you put down your deficits, these are my good points, and then you discuss with your classmates as well as your professors on how to improve that.
Oh, okay.
So that's a continuous process, and that it has to be like a department-wise initiative where that wiki remains with the student like forever, and you add people in your class who you want to include, and then move people from there who you don't, class-wise, yeah.
But it is a great question,
Mhm.
because we are taught that in professional interviews,
Mhm.
when they ask questions
Right.
like, what is your greatest weakness?
Uh-huh.
You don't tell them. You say, I work too hard.
Mhm.
I am too dedicated.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how to separate my personal life from my professional passions,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
Anything like, I'm lazy, I'm really slow on the uptake.
I call it sickle walk.
You never say that, yeah.
My personal
Yeah.
life and hiking is much more important than mine.
Mhm.
We don't say that. So
Right.
the same thing, I would never encourage a student to create a portfolio that represents them, that says anything about their weakness. So it would have to be that like hidden place you're
Right.
talking about, where
Yes.
you select out assets that put your best foot forward.
Yes.
And
Yes, by lowlights, it's not the lowlights would not be included in the portfolio which you present to your employers. The lowlights remain for you to discuss with your professor and peers. So you tackle, because if you don't know your lowlights, the employer is going to catch you by cross-questioning, and you don't know, then you get flustered at the moment. But if you already know that this is my problem, then you know how to field it. So that's why you learn about your lowlights. That's why your thinking is required, like, because like we are doing in BSU, like Boise State, is like we are asking students, they have assignments, the professors gives them the assignments and they are just uploading it as if it's just like an assignment for a course. So they're not reflecting on it, they're getting a grade maybe, and maybe a little bit of feedback, but that's about it. And if nobody knows whether it's quality work or not.
is Boise State doing this?
Boise State has we have started the portfolio, which is like a requirement for students entering, first year students as well as 100 through 300 level university foundation students. So every professor is required, we haven't targeted everyone, but we have some selective departments who are required to start creating e-portfolios. So yeah. But we are not doing anything like this. We are not having any kind of reflection or we are not really coaching students or to make portfolios which are the best. Just making something, so.
It would be wonderful to see this experiment in application, or this theory, particularly in application in a year or two, without seeing the names or whatever.
Yeah.
See students begin to experiment with their strengths and their lowlights, and reflection on taking responsibility for their own learning.
That's an important part, because that's how you become like a higher order thinker. You just don't know, you just don't have the knowledge, or you just don't have the application. Oh, I can do this, I can solve this engineering problem. But you know why this happened, why you maybe you can't implement a project in a particular geographic area. You have cultural considerations, you have geography and things like that. So student is often not prepared to even look at those perspectives. They just are problem solvers. But a problem is not just math. It has every other elements which can only happen if you think at a higher level beyond application.
I think most of them, if you ask them about the problem solved, they would say the problem was getting the assignment in by Wednesday at 4 p.m.
Yes.
And then they're done.
They're done. Yeah, they're done.
They're not hots yet.
They're not hots yet. And you can't expect them, like they're just like, most of them would be like really young. So to encourage them to have a tendency for lifelong learning would be, you do it, your assignment is to reflect. Your assignment is to capture the lowlights. So it's just not, don't brag about your success of having the problem solved, but what couldn't you do? So that's kind of helping them to, like we looked at the game, Ender's Game last night, and it kind of reminded me that one of the questions was, look how he deals with frustrations. How does he deal with rejection? So you have to prepare your student. How would you deal with your classmates writing horrible reviews about your product? that's not yet your asset, that doesn't represent you yet, but how can you make it represent your best? So that's how you can use that critical energy to help yourself become better asset builders.
Is that the name of the article there?
That is, I have, yes, this is the name of the article, which is
Oh, right, okay.
e-portfolios as a quantitative and qualitative. So,
You know, when it's a professional, I mean, it's kind of a building identity as a professional, but wouldn't that normally be, what kind of collaboration is involved in that? I mean, wouldn't that normally be kind of in an engineering practice? More of a capstone or anything like that in engineering? Is that something they talk about?
they don't, what they say is that when the student enters, he or she takes on a role. So there are 4 stages in the role. So the capstone project might come in the process of their engineering education, but they're still in a role. So then it's not like the one role finishes and the other starts. It's like a recursive process.
They're
But
sometimes in that role.
yeah, sometimes not. And for every product, they're in that role, in all 4 roles.
Yeah.
So yeah, the capstone project may be one such example where they apply that 4 roles. So.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you for participating. We had, I think, good discussions. So, okay. So I'm going to end my.